My rich sister laughed when she saw my $40 dress at our family party. She didn't know the dress was made by the designer whose company she had been trying to buy for 2 years. She actually touched the sleeve, looked at the little fabric tag near my waist, and laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not the kind where someone is trying to be nice. She laughed the way people laugh when they think they've just discovered something embarrassing about you. Then she looked around at our family and said, "Seriously, Claire? $40? I could feel the room change. It was one of those small moments that probably would have meant nothing to anyone outside our family, but my sister and I had spent our entire lives being compared. She was the successful one, the beautiful one, the fashionable one, the one who knew how to walk into a room and make people notice her. I was the practical one, the quiet one, the one who supposedly didn't care about those things. And that night, standing in my parents' backyard wearing a dress that cost less than the shoes my sister had on, I suddenly felt 16 again. But I didn't tell her where the dress came from. I didn't tell her who made it. And I definitely didn't tell her that I'd received a phone call from that designer, less than 48 hours earlier. Because if I had told her the truth right then, the entire evening would have turned into something completely different. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 34, and I work as a project coordinator for a small architecture firm outside Philadelphia. Nothing glamorous. I don't hate my job. I actually like it. I get to work with people who care about what they're building, I get decent benefits, and I leave my office most days with enough energy to have a life afterward. My older sister Vanessa is 39, and Vanessa has never understood people like me. She runs a luxury retail company with her husband, Mark. They live in a renovated stone house with a driveway longer than some of the streets in my neighborhood. Their kitchen is the kind of kitchen where nobody actually wants to cook because everything looks too expensive to touch. Vanessa has a personal stylist, a membership at a private country club, a closet that probably costs more than my house. She knows the difference between 6 types of Italian leather. She can identify a designer handbag from across a restaurant. And for the last 2 years, she had been trying to buy a small American fashion company called Bellamy & Rowe. I'd heard the name dozens of times. Mostly because Vanessa talked about it constantly. The company wasn't huge. That was part of what made her obsessed with it. It had a cult following. Small production runs, beautiful handmade pieces. Customers waited months for certain designs. The founder was apparently extremely private and almost never appeared at public events. Vanessa hated that. She said it made the company unnecessarily mysterious, but she wanted it, badly. She'd made multiple offers. They'd all been rejected. According to Vanessa, the owner was being irrational. According to everyone else, the owner simply didn't want to sell. I didn't think much about it. Until the dress. The dress had arrived at my apartment 3 weeks before the family party. It came in a plain cardboard box, no glossy packaging, no giant logo, just tissue paper and a handwritten note. I still have the note. It said, "For the person who reminded me why I started making clothes in the first place." No signature, just one small initial at the bottom. E. The dress itself was simple, dark green, soft fabric, long sleeves, a fitted waist, nothing flashy. If you looked quickly, you might have thought it came from a nice department store. But when you actually touched it, you noticed the difference. The stitching was almost impossibly neat. The fabric had weight without feeling heavy. The buttons were covered by hand. There was a tiny embroidered flower inside the cuff. It was the kind of detail nobody could see unless they were looking for it. I hadn't paid $40 for the dress. Technically, I hadn't paid anything. But the dress had been valued at around $40 when it was sold during a small sample event. That's why Vanessa's comment was so funny to me later. Because the dress wasn't cheap, it was simply inexpensive. There's a difference. And I hadn't bought it. I had been given it. The story started almost 6 months earlier. My friend Melissa convinced me to attend a local charity market. I almost didn't go. It was held inside an old converted train station, and the weather was awful. Cold rain, wind, the kind of Saturday where you want to stay home with coffee and a blanket. But Melissa insisted. "There are local artists there," she told me. "You always complain that nobody supports small businesses. Here's your chance." So I went. There were candles, pottery, jewelry, paintings, handmade bags, and tucked into the back corner was a tiny clothing display. The woman running it looked nothing like the luxury designers Vanessa talked about. She wore jeans, an oversized gray sweater, and sneakers. Her hair was tied back messily. There was a sewing needle stuck into the cuff of her sleeve. She had 6 dresses hanging behind her. That's it. I picked up the green one. The woman watched me. You like that one? I love the fabric. She smiled. You're the first person who's noticed. We started talking. Her name was Elise Hart. She told me she designed everything herself. I asked where she sold. She shrugged. Mostly online, some boutiques. I asked if she had a website. She said she did. I looked it up, and that's when I recognized the name. Bellamy and Rowe. I almost dropped my phone. You're Elise Hart? She laughed. Usually. I stared at her. Vanessa had talked about this woman for years. Not in person, obviously, but Vanessa had mentioned her name. Elise Hart, the designer behind Bellamy and Rowe, the woman who had turned down Vanessa's acquisition offers, the woman Vanessa described as a talented designer with absolutely no business sense. I suddenly felt awkward. I didn't tell Elise who my sister was. I just asked about the dress. She said it was a sample. She'd made it for a collection that never launched. The company had changed direction. She didn't want the dress sitting in storage. $40, she said. I looked at her. That's all? She smiled. I'm not trying to get rich off it. I bought it. At least I tried to. When I pulled out my card, she shook her head. No. What? Keep it. I laughed. I can't just take it. You can. I don't even know you. I know. She looked at the dress, then at me. You were the only person here who asked about how it was made. I didn't know what to say, so I thanked her, and I took the dress home. I didn't tell Vanessa. I didn't tell anyone. Not because it was a secret. It just didn't seem important. Until about 2 months later, Elise contacted me. She wanted to know if I'd worn the dress. I sent her a picture. She loved it. Then she asked if I'd be willing to give her some feedback on a new collection. I said sure. That turned into a conversation. Then another. Eventually, Elise told me something I found strange. She said she was thinking about stepping away from Bellamy and Rowe, not because she wanted to quit designing, because she was tired of investors trying to turn the company into something it wasn't. I asked what she meant. She said, people keep offering me money for the name. Nobody asks what the name is supposed to mean. I remembered that sentence, because it sounded exactly like something Vanessa would never understand. 2 weeks before the family party, Elise called me. We talked for nearly an hour. She told me Vanessa's company had made another offer. A huge one. Elise had rejected it. Then she said something that surprised me. I think your sister believes the company is worth more without me. I laughed. She might. She may be right financially. Then why not sell? Elise was quiet. Because I don't want to watch someone turn something I built into a logo. That was the last serious conversation we had before the party. At least, that's what I thought. The family party was for my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. They rented tents, there were string lights, a caterer, about 50 family members and close friends. My mother had spent 2 weeks worrying about whether everyone would have enough food. My father kept saying, it's just a backyard party. My mother disagreed. It was one of those warm summer evenings where the air stayed comfortable after sunset. I arrived around 6:30. My mother hugged me immediately. You look beautiful, thank you. She stepped back and looked at the dress. That color is perfect on you. I smiled. It's one of my favorites. Then I saw Vanessa. She was standing near the patio with 3 women I didn't recognize. She wore a cream-colored dress with a designer belt and gold earrings. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine. She saw me. Her eyes moved from my face to my shoes, then down to the dress. Her expression changed, not dramatically, just enough. She walked over. Claire. Hey. She hugged me lightly, then pulled back. That's new? Yeah. She touched the fabric. What is it? A dress. She gave me a look. I can see that. I smiled. Then we're off to a good start. She laughed. Where did you get it? I hesitated. Local. Local where? Just a local designer. Vanessa ran her fingers along the sleeve. It's cute. I knew that tone. Cute was not a compliment coming from Vanessa. Thanks. She looked at the stitching, then at me. How much? I shrugged. $40. Her eyebrows went up. 40? Yep, she laughed. Okay. I didn't respond. One of the women beside her asked, what's wrong with $40? Vanessa smiled. Nothing, I'm just surprised. Then she looked at me. Claire has always been good at finding bargains. My mother, who had been standing nearby, gave Vanessa a warning look. Vanessa. What? Don't start. Vanessa held up her hands. I'm not starting anything. Then she looked back at my dress. I'm just saying, with all the cheap clothing out there, you have to be careful. I looked down at myself. I'm pretty sure I'll survive. She laughed. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. Her smile disappeared for a second. Then she recovered. You know what? If you like it, that's all that matters. I nodded. Exactly. I walked away. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. About an hour later, everyone gathered around the tables for dinner. Vanessa was sitting across from me. She had spent the previous 20 minutes talking about a trip she and Mark had taken to Milan. Then she started talking about a private shopping event, then a designer she knew, then a handbag. Eventually, one of our cousins asked her about Bellamy and Rowe. That changed everything. So did you ever buy that fashion company? Emily asked. Vanessa smiled. Not yet. Still trying? Of course. Why? Vanessa leaned back. Because the brand is undervalued. I nearly choked on my drink. She continued. The designer is incredibly talented, but she has no idea how to scale. I kept eating. Emily asked. Isn't she famous? Within a certain circle. What does she want for the company? Vanessa sighed. More than it's worth. Then she looked at me. Actually, Claire, you might like her stuff. I froze. Vanessa smiled. You're wearing something that's probably inspired by her style. I swallowed. Probably. She laughed. You don't even know who she is, do you? I looked at her. I've heard the name. See? She smiled triumphantly. This is what I mean. What? You don't know anything about fashion, but somehow you keep stumbling into things you think make you look sophisticated. The table went quiet. My cousin Emily looked uncomfortable. My mother said, Vanessa, that's enough. Vanessa rolled her eyes. I'm kidding. I put my fork down. I know. She stared at me. You're upset. No. You are. I'm really not. Then why are you being so quiet? I looked at her. Because I don't think this conversation is worth having. That irritated her. She leaned closer. You know what your problem is? I almost laughed. No. You pretend you don't care about money or appearances because you know you can't compete. The table went completely silent. I felt my face getting hot, not because she was right, because she was saying it in front of our parents, in front of our cousins, at our parents' anniversary party. I looked at my mother. She looked devastated. My father finally spoke. Vanessa, she sighed. What? I'm just being honest. I looked back at my sister. Then let me be honest too. She smiled. Go ahead. I like my dress. Her smile faded. I like my life. She stared at me. And I'm not interested in competing with you. Nobody spoke. I picked up my glass. Vanessa shook her head. That's easy to say when you don't have anything to compete with. I could have answered. I didn't. Because at that moment, my phone vibrated. I looked down. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the preview. Claire, please call me. It's Elise. Something has happened. My heart started beating faster. I stood up. I need to take this. Vanessa watched me walk away. I went around the side of my parents' house. Hello? Elise answered immediately. Claire? Yeah. Are you with your family? Yes. Is Vanessa there? I looked back toward the patio. Yes. Elise went silent. What happened? She found out about you. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? She knows you bought one of my pieces. I frowned. That isn't a big deal. No, her voice sounded tense. Claire, she knows more than that. I leaned against the house. What does she know? I don't know exactly. Elise, I received a message from someone inside her company. What did they say? They asked me who you were. I felt a chill. Why would they care? Because your name appeared in something. What? I don't know. She paused, then said, But I think your sister has been looking into you. I stared through the window. Vanessa was still sitting at the table, talking, laughing, completely unaware of what I was hearing. Why would she investigate me? Elise's voice dropped. Because the dress isn't the only thing connecting you to me. I couldn't breathe for a second. What does that mean? I'll explain everything. When? Tomorrow. Why not now? Because I don't want to say this over the phone. I'm standing outside my parents' house. I know. There was fear in her voice. Real fear. Then she said something that changed the entire situation. Claire, the dress you have isn't a sample from an old collection. I looked down at the green fabric. What is it? It was the first prototype for the collection that made Bellamy and Rowe valuable. I didn't understand. Elise continued. And there is something sewn inside that dress. My hand instinctively moved toward the inside of the sleeve. What? A label. There is a label, not the one you can see. I went still. What am I supposed to look for? 3 numbers. I felt my pulse quicken. What numbers? April 17, 1991. I frowned. That means nothing to me. It will. Then she hung up. I stood there staring at my phone. I didn't know what the numbers meant. I didn't know why Vanessa cared. And I definitely didn't know why Elise sounded frightened. I went back inside. Dinner was winding down. Vanessa was standing near the dessert table. She looked at me, then at my dress. Her expression was different now, not mocking, focused. She walked over. Who was that? A friend. Which friend? I smiled. Why? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached toward my sleeve. I stepped back. What are you doing? Nothing. She smiled. But her eyes weren't smiling. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. I watched her face change. She read the message twice. Then she looked directly at me. Claire. What? Where exactly did you get that dress? I felt my stomach tighten. Why? Because I just got an email from my acquisition team. She held up her phone. They sent me a photo. My heart started pounding. What photo? Vanessa turned the screen toward me. It was a photograph of the inside of my dress, the hidden label. And beneath it were the 3 numbers Elise had just given me. April 17, 1991. Vanessa looked at me. For the first time in my entire life, my sister didn't look confident. She looked scared. Then she whispered, Claire, why is your dress carrying the original Bellamy and Rowe founders code? And before I could answer, her phone buzzed again. This time the message contained a name. A name I had never seen before. Vanessa read it. Then slowly looked back at me. Who is Eleanor Hart? I stared at her, because I suddenly realized Elise had never told me her last name. And the dress I'd been wearing all night might not have been given to me by Elise at all. It might have been given to me by the person who had started the company Vanessa had spent 2 years trying to buy. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. Vanessa was still holding her phone between us. The name on the screen was Eleanor Hart. I looked at it again, then at Vanessa. Who is Eleanor? Vanessa didn't answer. Vanessa? She lowered the phone. Where did you get that dress? You already asked me that. I know. Her voice was different now. The sarcasm was gone. So was the confidence. Claire, I'm serious. So am I. She looked toward the patio where our parents and relatives were still talking. Then she grabbed my wrist lightly. Come with me. I pulled my arm back. Don't. She stopped. That one word seemed to remind her that I wasn't 16 anymore. We were 2 adult women standing beside our parents' house, and for once, she didn't get to decide what happened next. I looked at the screen again. Why does that name scare you? Vanessa swallowed. It doesn't. You're a terrible liar. She looked away. Then she said, Eleanor Hart is the original founder of Bellamy and Rowe. My stomach dropped. Elise? No. Then who is Elise? Vanessa shook her head. I don't know. You've been trying to buy the company for 2 years. I've been trying to buy Bellamy and Rowe. I didn't say I knew everything about the founder. You knew enough to know Eleanor Hart's name. I knew it from old corporate records. I stared at her. Then why are you looking at me like I just walked out of a grave? That almost made her laugh. Almost. Instead, she said, because Eleanor Hart disappeared. What do you mean disappeared? Not literally. Then what? She left the company. When? 20 years ago. I looked down at the dress. The green fabric suddenly felt much heavier. Then why is her code inside this? Vanessa didn't answer. Her phone buzzed again. She looked at it. This time I saw the message. The buyer wants confirmation that Claire has the original prototype. Do not let her leave with it. I looked at Vanessa. She looked at me. What buyer? I asked. She locked the phone. It's complicated. No, it's actually getting pretty simple. I stepped away. I'm going home. Claire, wait. No, please. That word stopped me. Vanessa almost never said please. She looked genuinely frightened. Don't leave with the dress. I stared at her. Why? Because if that really is the original prototype, it doesn't belong to you. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. Funny, what? An hour ago, it was a cheap $40 dress. She looked down. I didn't know. I know. That seemed to hurt her. I walked back toward the party. My mother noticed immediately that something was wrong. Claire, I'm okay. Vanessa followed me. She looked at Mom. Mom, can we talk? Mom looked between us. What happened? Nothing, I said. Something happened, Mom replied. Dad joined us. What is going on? Vanessa looked at me. I could see the calculation happening in her head. She was trying to decide how much to tell them. I decided for her. Apparently this dress has something to do with Bellamy and Rowe. My father frowned. The clothing company? Yes. Mom looked confused. What does your dress have to do with a clothing company? Vanessa said quietly, possibly everything. Nobody spoke. Then Mom looked at me. Claire, what is happening? I took a breath. I don't know yet. That was the truth. And for the first time that evening, I wasn't interested in pretending otherwise. I went home that night with the dress still on. I didn't sleep. Around midnight, Elise called. I answered immediately. Who is Eleanor Hart? There was silence. Then Elise said, so you know. I know her name. Who told you? Vanessa. Another silence. Elise, what's going on? I need you to trust me. I've been trusting you for months. Right now I'm wearing a dress that apparently contains some secret corporate code, and my sister just received a message telling her not to let me leave with it. Elise exhaled. I was afraid this would happen. Then tell me the truth. I will. When? Tomorrow morning. No. I sat up in bed. Now. She was quiet. Finally she said, Eleanor Hart is my mother. I stared at the wall. What? My name isn't Elise Hart. My heart started pounding. My legal name is Elise Eleanor Hart. I remembered the little initial on the note. E, she continued. I've used Elise Bell professionally for years because I didn't want people connecting me to my mother's company. I couldn't speak. Why? Because I didn't want Bellamy and Rowe. I laughed softly. That makes two of us. No, Claire, you don't understand. Then explain it. My mother built Bellamy and Rowe with one principle. Clothes were supposed to make ordinary women feel like themselves, not make them feel poor because they couldn't afford luxury. I looked down at my dress. That sounds familiar. She made that green dress. I froze. Elise? My mother made the first version of it. When? 1991. The numbers. April 17, 1991. I whispered them aloud. April 17, 1991. Yes. What happened that day? My mother finished the prototype. I waited. And then she gave it to someone. Who? You. I stopped breathing for a second. What? She gave it to your mother. I sat completely still. My mother? Yes. I thought about my mom, the woman who had spent 40 years saving wrapping paper, the woman who still had a coffee can full of spare buttons, the woman who had never owned a designer dress in her life. Why? Elise's voice softened. Because your mother was the reason my mother started Bellamy and Rowe. I didn't understand, so she told me. 35 years ago, before Bellamy and Rowe existed, Eleanor Hart had been a single mother working as a seamstress. She designed clothes at night. She worked during the day. She was talented, but she had no money and no connections. One afternoon, she was working at a department store alteration counter when my mother brought in a dress. Mom couldn't afford the expensive alterations the store recommended, so Eleanor fixed it herself. Then she noticed my mother had been carrying an old sewing kit. They started talking. My mother told her something that Eleanor never forgot. She said she wished women could buy beautiful clothes without having to choose between looking good and paying their bills. Eleanor laughed. Then she apparently said, maybe somebody should make them. My mother replied, maybe you should. That conversation became the beginning of everything. Eleanor began designing simple dresses. My mother became one of her first customers. When Eleanor finished the green prototype in 1991, she gave it to my mother. The dress was never officially released. Instead, it became the private reference piece for the philosophy behind the company. The numbers inside weren't a corporate code, they were a date. The date Eleanor finished it, April 17, 1991. The dress was the first physical expression of the idea that eventually became Bellamy and Rowe. I sat there holding the sleeve. Then how did it get to me? Elise answered quietly. My mother gave it to your mother years later. She never told me. She didn't know it mattered. I thought about my mother. She had probably forgotten the story, or maybe she remembered but never considered it important. Why did you give it to me? I didn't. I closed my eyes. Then who did? My mother. That explained the handwritten note, for the person who reminded me why I started making clothes in the first place. But there was more. Elise told me that Eleanor had seen a photo of me online. Not a glamorous photo. It was a picture from a community event where I had been helping women build professional resumes. I remembered that day. I'd been wearing an old sweater. Eleanor had apparently seen it through a mutual friend. She asked me who you were. Elise said. I told her you were my friend. She asked what you did. I told her, and then she said, she understands. I smiled despite myself. She doesn't even know me. She said she knew enough. I looked at the dress. Where is your mother? There was a pause. She has Alzheimer's. My heart sank. She doesn't remember Bellamy and Rowe anymore. Oh, she remembers sewing. Elise's voice cracked. She remembers my father. She remembers certain songs. But most days she doesn't remember the company. I suddenly understood why Elise had been so protective of everything. Then why is Vanessa trying to buy it? Because the company is being sold. What? That's what I've been trying to stop. Elise explained that Vanessa's acquisition wasn't actually about clothes. Vanessa's company wanted Bellamy and Rowe's distribution network, customer database, and brand recognition. They planned to acquire it, restructure it, and sell portions of the business. Elise believed the brand itself would eventually disappear. But there was another problem. The company had been quietly searching for the original prototype, because the board had discovered that certain rights connected to the founding collection had never been properly transferred. The original prototype wasn't legally worth millions. But it was evidence. Evidence of Eleanor's authorship. Evidence of the company's founding philosophy. And more importantly, evidence that a later amendment transferring certain creative rights had never been authorized by Eleanor. If Vanessa acquired the company before that was resolved, she could control the brand while leaving Eleanor's family with almost nothing. I asked the question that mattered. Why didn't your mother stop it? She couldn't. And you? I've been fighting from the outside. So why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't sure I could trust anyone. I sat silently. Then I said, you trusted me. Yes. Why? Because you bought a $40 dress and asked who made it. I smiled. That simple? Sometimes it is. The next morning I met Elise at a small cafe. She arrived with a woman in her 70s. Silver hair, soft blue cardigan, a calm expression. I knew immediately. Eleanor Hart. She looked at me, then at the dress. Her eyes filled with tears. She reached out and touched the sleeve. Green, she whispered. I nodded. Yes. She smiled. Then she said something that broke my heart. I made that for your mother. I looked at Elise. She remembers? Some days. Eleanor looked at me again. Your mother always liked green. She still does. Eleanor laughed softly. Then she touched the little embroidered flower inside the cuff. I almost didn't put that there. Why did you? She looked confused for a moment, then smiled. Because nobody sees the inside. I understood. The dress wasn't designed for applause, it was designed for the person wearing it. That was the whole point. And suddenly Vanessa's comments from the night before sounded very different. I didn't hate my sister, but I finally understood how far apart our worlds had become. Vanessa saw clothing from the outside. Eleanor had built clothing from the inside. And somehow, I'd ended up standing in the middle. The problem was, Vanessa wasn't willing to let it go. She called me that afternoon. I know about Mom. I knew immediately she meant Eleanor. How? My acquisition team found the records. You were investigating her. I was investigating the company. Same thing? No. She sounded exhausted. Claire, I didn't know your dress was connected to her. I believe you. Do you? Yes. That surprised her. Then she said, I need you to understand something. Okay. I wasn't trying to destroy Bellamy and Rowe. I know. I wanted it because I thought I could save it. I didn't answer. She continued. When I was 24, I started a business with almost nothing. Dad gave me a small loan. I built it. I know. No, you don't. Her voice cracked. Everybody thinks I got lucky. They don't know how hard I worked. I listened. I watched people dismiss me because I was a woman. I watched investors talk over me. I learned very quickly that if you weren't the richest person in the room, people assumed you didn't belong there. She paused. So I became the richest person in the room. I didn't know what to say. I thought Bellamy and Rowe was the next step, she said. I thought if I bought it, I'd finally prove that I belonged with the companies that used to ignore me. There it was. Not evil, not greed alone. Insecurity. A lifetime of trying to prove she was worth something. I said, Vanessa, you already proved it. She laughed bitterly. You don't understand. Maybe I understand more than you think. Silence. Then she said, the buyer wants an answer by Friday. What buyer? Stonebridge Capital. I recognize the name. They've been funding your acquisition? Yes. And if you don't buy Bellamy and Rowe? They'll move on. I asked, What happens to the company? She didn't answer. Vanessa. It gets broken apart. That was the truth. The company would be stripped for its profitable assets. The brand might survive, the original identity probably wouldn't. I made my decision. We're stopping it. She was quiet. What does that mean? It means we're going to tell them the truth. She laughed nervously. You're going to destroy my deal. No. You have no idea what you're saying. I do. You think you're better than me because you have this dress? No. Then what? I think we both got lost trying to prove things to people who weren't paying attention. She didn't respond. I continued. I'm not taking anything from you. What do you want? I want Bellamy and Rowe to stay what Eleanor built. And how exactly do you plan to do that? I don't know yet. That was the honest answer, but I had a lease. I had Eleanor. And I had the dress. We hired an attorney who specialized in intellectual property and corporate ownership. The investigation took weeks. The original company records were incomplete. Several transfers had been improperly documented. The acquisition agreement Vanessa had been negotiating contained language that assumed Bellamy and Rowe owned certain rights that were actually still connected to Eleanor. The dress itself wasn't some magical legal weapon, it was evidence. More importantly, Eleanor's old notebooks contained sketches matching the original prototype. Her handwriting was on the pages. The date matched. The embroidery matched. The design history matched. Everything lined up. Then we found the biggest problem. The acquisition contract Vanessa was preparing to sign required Eleanor's rights to be cleared before closing. If she signed anyway, she could become personally responsible for certain representations. Vanessa hadn't known. Her own advisors had been rushing her, and suddenly I understood why she had been so nervous at the party. She hadn't been afraid of my dress. She'd been afraid she'd spent 2 years chasing a company whose foundation wasn't legally as clean as everyone had told her. We confronted her at her office. I expected anger. Instead, she looked defeated. You knew, she said. I found out. You could have stopped me. I could have. She stared at me. Why didn't you? Because you're my sister. She looked down. Then she said, I don't deserve that. Maybe not. She laughed softly. For the first time, there was no competition in the room, just two sisters. She asked, what happens now? We tell the buyer everything. Then I lose the acquisition. Yes. She nodded. I thought she would explode. She didn't. Instead she said, maybe I was never supposed to have it. The sale was cancelled. Stonebridge walked away. Vanessa's company lost the acquisition opportunity, but she didn't lose everything, because after the truth came out, Vanessa changed her offer. Instead of buying Bellamy and Rowe, she proposed a partnership. A minority investment. No control over creative decisions. No forced sale. No restructuring without Eleanor's approval through the family trust. The company remained independent. Elise became creative director. Eleanor's original designs were preserved. And the green dress? It became part of the company's private archive. They offered me money for it. I refused. They offered to display it. I agreed. Only under one condition. It had to be displayed with the original handwritten note. The one Eleanor had written. The exhibit opened 6 months later. My parents came, Vanessa came, so did a handful of relatives who had been at the party. There was a small plaque beside the dress. It explained that the prototype represented the founding philosophy of Bellamy and Rowe. Not luxury, not status, craftsmanship, accessibility, and the belief that a woman shouldn't have to spend a fortune to feel beautiful. I stood beside Vanessa. She read the plaque for a long time. Then she said, you know what? What? I used to think that dress was worth $40. I smiled. So did I. She shook her head. No. She looked at me. It was worth a lot more. I thought about that. Not financially, emotionally. It had connected my mother to Eleanor, Eleanor to Elise, Elise to me. And somehow, through all of that, it had exposed the thing my sister and I had spent decades avoiding. We had been competing over completely different definitions of success. Vanessa wanted people to see her. I wanted to know that the people I cared about could see themselves. Neither desire was wrong. But somewhere along the way, Vanessa had started believing that if she wasn't above everyone else, she was beneath them. And I had started believing that if I stayed quiet, nobody could hurt me. We were both wrong. The family party changed after that. Not dramatically. Nobody gathered around and apologized in some perfect cinematic moment. Real families don't work that way. My mother still worried about everyone's feelings. My father still avoided difficult conversations, until someone forced him into them. Some relatives continued to think Vanessa had simply made a bad business decision. Others thought I had somehow gotten lucky. That's okay. I don't need everyone to understand. Vanessa and I are different now. We're not suddenly inseparable. We still disagree. She still spends more on a handbag than I would spend on a vacation. I still buy coffee from the place with a loyalty card. But she doesn't mock it anymore, and I don't secretly resent her for being successful. A few months ago she invited me to lunch. She showed up wearing a simple dress. No obvious logo. No giant designer label. I looked at her. That's new, she smiled. $40. I laughed. You're kidding. No. She sat down. I bought it because I liked it. I looked at her. That's a dangerous development. She laughed. Don't tell anyone. We talked for 2 hours. About work, our parents, her marriage, my apartment, normal things. At one point, she asked me if I still had the green dress. I told her yes. Do you ever wear it? Sometimes. She smiled. Good. I asked why. She thought for a moment. Because I think my whole life I thought expensive things were automatically more valuable. She looked down at her coffee. And then you showed up at Mom and Dad's party in a $40 dress that taught me otherwise. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled. The funny thing is, I still own that dress. It still looks almost exactly the same. The fabric has softened. One of the buttons has been replaced. There's a tiny stain near the hem that never completely came out. It's not perfect. Neither am I. But whenever I wear it, I remember my mother. I remember Eleanor. I remember Elise. And I remember my sister standing in my parents' backyard, laughing because she thought $40 told her everything she needed to know about me. It didn't. The price tag never told the whole story. Neither did the house I lived in. Neither did my job. Neither did the car I drove. And neither did the woman standing across from me in designer clothes. Because people are almost never as simple as the labels we put on them. Vanessa spent 2 years trying to buy a company, because she thought owning it would finally prove she belonged. I spent years trying not to compete because I thought refusing to fight meant I was above the competition. Eleanor built a company because she wanted ordinary women to feel valued. And somehow, the cheapest dress in the room became the thing that brought all of those stories together. The last time I saw Eleanor, she didn't remember my name. She didn't remember Bellamy and Rowe. But she touched the green sleeve and smiled. Then she said, "Your mother always liked that one." I told her, "She still does." Eleanor nodded. Good, that was all. But it was enough. Because the dress was never really about $40. It was about who made it, why they made it. And the people who believed something beautiful didn't have to be expensive to matter. And after everything that happened, I think that's what I finally understood about my sister too. Vanessa spent years trying to prove she was worth more than everyone else. I spent years trying to prove I didn't care what anyone thought. In the end, neither of us needed to prove anything. We just needed to stop measuring our worth by the price tag.